Hey, stay right there. This is Alex Mondosian, and we are going to begin in about 7 minutes. I'm looking at the clock that's right up there. You can't see it, but you can see me. And I have a very special guest I've only hung out with on a hangout once before. And if you haven't seen him, you're in for a treat because this is a training on how to do presentations on the physical stage. I'm the virtual stage guy. This gentleman is the physical stage guy, and I've seen literally with 8 to 10,000 people in the audience, literally 20% of them jump out of their seats, go on stage, and then run to the back tables. I've never seen anything like it in my life. I've seen a lot of table rushes. I've seen a lot of bookstores, as they call it. But when I saw him, I thought, wow, I think he pulled that from such and such, and he pulled that from such and such. And we went to the green room, and he said, I pulled it from such and such, and this is what I do for me. And he just puts things together as you will put things together that he will teach you today. And you don't have to have the same level of success, but 1/100th of the success that he has, you will make a very good living speaking from the stage. Everyone wants to speak from the stage. I used to think people had, fear of public speaking. They don't when there are a lot of people in the audience, especially if they're at an event. They want to get on stage. They want to dance on stage, but do you want to present so that you can monetize that speech? Well, we are going to begin in 5 minutes, and this is called the Green Room because this is an evergreen presentation. This presentation is designed to be going on and on and on for as long as I'm living, and showing what this gentleman's not only presentation skills are about, but how he teaches others to present. And by the way, you can utilize the same presentation skills on a hangout, on a webinar, in a teleseminar, so it's all about presentation. Your future depends on how well you present. Some of the greatest spiritual leaders in history were great presenters. They presented first vocally through a speech, and then it was written, or written on scrolls, or written in books. Now, before we begin, I want to welcome Vanessa Horn, hanging out from I don't know where today, but hey, Vanessa, how you doing? Ricardo Romano, I know he's hanging out from Italy, and he's speaking to an audience of 5,000 in the audience. He wants to know the best way to manage the best way to manage the leads that come in from an audience. Adriana saying hello. Greetings from Brazil, my first event. Yay! And she says yes. Peter, totally looking forward to this hangout. Thank you, Alex. Diana, hanging out from Winnipeg, Canada. Thanks for the invite. Good evening to all. Stan in Cincinnati, Ohio. Stan, I feel like you're very local here compared to everybody else. We have South Africa being represented. Jerry Hansen, best and most timely for me on this subject matter right now, he says. Rod Rome, we're just having this discussion this morning and your video is timely. Well, my video was all about presentation skills. I can pinpoint the amount of money I make, the houses that I've paid for, the children I have, the clothes they wear, directly to the presentations I've given. So in a moment, I'm not going to reveal him yet. You will see my guest, and it will be an evergreen event, meaning you can go back, and I want you to continue education with him. Let me repeat. I want you to continue education with him. This is going to be a content-rich presentation with the opportunity to continue education. Many of you have already opted in. We will give you resources on how to continue. What he teaches and how he teaches, I don't. So I like to bring the best I know of that I've witnessed. Behavior never lies. I've seen it on stage. And he and I speak on similar stages because we joint venture with the similar seminar organizations, Success Resources and EmpowerNet. So he will be on with us in about 3 minutes. Sean, you're on right now. Oh, Jerry says, thanks for all you do. Storytelling plays a huge part when I'm presenting. I'm excited about learning Andy's techniques. Well, there you go. It's Andy, and his last name is Harrington. He's got a famous last name because Kevin Harrington, another good friend of mine, he's out there with Shark Tank. He was there in the infomercial business. This is Andy Harrington, and Andy is going to teach you about presentations. Let's just show him very quickly and then leave him from the big screen. Andy, are you ready?
Oh, good. Thank you, Alex. Yes, I'm ready to go.
Where are you?
Actually, I'm in a hotel in Gatwick right now. I have a program which I'm running for the next few days here in Gatwick. So I'm here. I thought it would be best to be in the hotel so that because it's like, what is it, 1 o'clock in the morning here in the UK. So.
Okay. And I want everyone to hear that. It's 1 a.m. in the morning. That is whatever it takes. And sometimes with any type of speaker, professional or non-professional, you got to do whatever it takes. If you have an opportunity to be on stage, get on stage and do whatever it takes. This is the presentation invitation you saw. Fail-proof presentation principles. These are fail-proof if you can master them. So we have a slideshow ready for you, and I'm going to count down now because what's about to happen, CL Webb, hanging out from Incline Village, Nevada, welcome. The rest of you, I will not be acknowledging you because we're going straight to the presentation now. So here we go. I'm going to count down 3, 2, 1, and this is the presentation that will be evergreen. So it's a presentation within a presentation. 3, 2, 1. Hit it. Hello and welcome. This is all about the fail-proof principles on how to present your message better, faster, more reliably to make money. And I've invited a guest and a good friend of mine to do just that because behavior never lies. Now, I believe there are 2 types of speeches in the world, and one of my mentors, the great Jim Rohn, who's no longer living on earth, but his message lives on and on, he would speak of 2 speakers and 2 orators, those are speakers, public speakers, of antiquity. And one was Cicero. Now, I'm sure you've heard of Cicero if you've ever studied history. He was a Roman, and when Cicero spoke, people would say, what a great speech. Now, prior to Cicero, there was another orator of antiquity. His name was Demosthenes. He was a Greek. And when Demosthenes would speak, the people would say, let us march. And the marching wasn't so enlightening because it was marching into battle against Philip of Macedon at the time. But if you're going to be a speaker and presenter, professional or otherwise, be more like Demosthenes versus Cicero, because you'll make a lot more money and you'll leave a much bigger legacy. Today is all about creating motion with emotion of a presentation that you craft for yourself and your message. And I have brought Andy Harrington on this hangout. It's 1 a.m. in the morning right now, and he is in transit like he typically is, hanging out from Gatwick. Andy, welcome, and what gives you the right to talk about this material?
Well, thanks, Alex, and welcome, everybody. I really appreciate you coming on this call. I guess my speaking career started quite a long time ago, really. Like many people, I was in a Tony Robbins seminar, and I was sitting in the front row there with my wife, and as luck would have it, he chose her to work with one-on-one at the front of the room because he was going to demonstrate the power of his techniques, etc. And he looked for someone who's depressed. My wife unfortunately qualified for this. We've been through some court cases. She's been abused as a youngster, and unfortunately her mum and her aunties and her brother all gave evidence for the defence. And this obviously caused quite a big problem for her, even though we won the case. And so in the end, after doing many things, including taking her to a hospital, etc., we wound up at a Tony Robbins seminar, having travelled all the way from the UK to the US, and found ourselves sitting in that front row, and he's chosen her to work with one-on-one at the front of the room. And I didn't know what he was doing at the time. He was going through these kind of NLP-type techniques, and I didn't know what he was doing. In fact, what he was doing, it seemed to be, was making it worse because, you know, he was kind of getting the pattern running, I guess. He was trying to get her to access this depression so he could do something about it, but it seemed to be going horribly wrong until he asked a really odd question that really changed the direction of her thoughts, which was, whilst in the middle of this depressive situation, he asked her if she'd ever had an explosive orgasm, which is a bit unusual, to say the least. And it caused her to kind of go, what? And as a result of that, he kind of pressed her more, said, well, you know, have you ever had one? And yeah, remember, I'm sitting next to her at this moment in time, and there's big screens on either side, viewing this whole intervention taking place. And you know, he kind of encouraged her to get into this experience of, because she could do the depression now. So he says, "Can you do the other thing now?" She's like, "I can't do that." And of course, he's subtly teaching her she can change her state. Ultimately, her life changed in this one conversation. And I kind of remember thinking to myself, my gosh, what a shame that most people don't know about this exists. And a voice went off in my head and said, well, maybe that's why you're here. Maybe you're here as part of your journey to become a great speaker. Maybe you could be like Robbins. But then I kind of looked at myself and thought, Andy, you can't be like Tony Robbins. His teeth are bigger than you. That's what I genuinely thought. And I kind of parked the idea completely until a later stage in the seminar, when we were pairing up with a stranger, looking directly into their eyes and setting all this love and to be really present for them. And I couldn't find a partner until it dawned on me that maybe I should ask Tony Robbins to be my partner. And to my complete surprise, he agreed. And I got to have these 3 minutes of intimacy with Anthony Robbins that changed my life, because in that moment there were tears that were streaming out of my eyes of such gratitude for him and what he'd done for us. And he was crying as well. I guess he connected with that truth. And in that moment, I made a life-changing decision that I was going to become a speaker and I was going to help other people. I didn't have any content. I didn't have any tools, tactics, anything. Just this overriding desire. I'd had a company at this point had done very well. We'd pulled in about £21 million. Came back, sold my shares in my company for a ridiculously small amount because I just had this burning ambition to do this. And I kind of figured out over a number of years how to not do it, as well as figuring out how to do it. And I guess now, 10 years later, having shared the stage, well, a couple of times with Tony Robbins himself, which was, I guess, coming full circle, but also people like Bill Clinton. There's a great bit. In fact, there's some slides there I think you might better just show. I think I have a slide there with just a few of the folks that I've spoken alongside, I guess. Are you in control of the slides there, Alec?
I am, and we're going to go through a slideshow, and if it's okay with you, Andy, I'm going to come back and forth and just ask you questions that many of the viewers may be watching, because what you just did in about 300 seconds is what my tribe would know as the ETR, the Earn the Right speech. This is what uniquely qualifies you, so it's a way for them to get to know you in a very short time period, and it's one of the strategies that I'm sure you teach. So is that okay if I come back and forth with elements like that? Yes?
Yes, of course. Interrogate me away.
Okay, here we go. So let's start with our guest of honor, who, in this case, it was not 1 a.m. in the morning here, but this is Andy on stage. And then these are some of the folks that you've worked with. Go ahead and give us some background.
Yeah, I mean, as I say, I've been very fortunate to share the stage with some people. I mean, people that I went to their seminars. I remember going to a Brian Tracy seminar when I was like 17 years old, and he shook my hand and completely berated me because my handshake was so weak. And I remember it to this day. And then I got to spoke alongside Brian about 10 years later. And of course, I mentioned it to him. He wouldn't have remembered, obviously, but it was interesting. And I just hang out with some really cool people that are, movers and shakers of the world. And here's the thing. A lot of people think you need to be a superstar or have achieved something great to be a speaker. But actually, what's truer is that people are getting hired today to speak are not necessarily the movers and shakers of the world only. They're not necessarily people who've climbed Mount Everest or swum across the Arctic Circle, but ordinary or seemingly ordinary people, but who have, because of their life struggles and the challenge they've had and the focus that they've had for a number of years, have figured out some pretty cool answers to some challenges that many people have. And those people are getting hired because those are real people with real answers, but answers that can be implemented into somebody's life. Because, yes, it's nice to hear a story of someone climbing Mount Everest, but unless you plan to climb Mount Everest, there's probably not that much in the speech of much use to you in real terms, unless you metaphorically use some of the ideas for climbing a mountain to describe how you might metaphorically climb your own mountain to have a business or overcome a relationship challenge or something like that. So people getting hired today are ordinary folks, but with extraordinary answers. And that's what I've been able to do is, I've been able to stand on the stage and figure out one thing, which is how do I serve an audience, but how do I also invite them to do further business with me, to buy a product or a service at the very end of that talk, not later, not 10 years later, not 2 weeks later, but right there and then to get out a credit card and pay there and then for a product or a service that's a really good fit for what they have, of great value, and it's something that they want to move towards and do immediately. So, and that's the one thing that we can all do. There was a question, I think, Alex, we spoke earlier. Someone asked the question relating to, what should be your first speech? Well, you need to develop something that's commonly called your signature talk, which is a talk that you'll typically give, which has a 30-minute version, a 60-minute version, a 90-minute version, a 2-hour version, but it's essentially the same talk, more or less, and that talk will ultimately encourage and invite people to do business with you as well. That's always your first talk, because how are you going to get your second talk unless you monetize the first one? And unless you already, like I say, are a celebrity, which there may be people on the line that are, then you're going to need to sell a product or a service at the end of that talk to monetize it so that it's a business, not just a hobby.
Well, I want to go back to this slide because you tell me when to further the slide, and just say next slide, please, because I'm going to be controlling it here from the Hangout. But I do recognize many of these folks. This is John DeMartini, Larry King, whose house I've been in, Bill Clinton, I've shaken his hand. This is Bob Proctor, Bill Cosby, Les Brown. Here's Tony Robbins. George Foreman, I remember selling the Quick Cook Grill on a QVC going many years back. Robert Kiyosaki. Now, this is Sir Richard Branson. You have a picture of him. All of these folks, except for a few, are fee-paid speakers, which is one species of speaker. Is that what you're talking about here, or are you talking about another type of speech to deliver? Because you're offering continuing education at the end. You're ostensibly paid after you talk. All of these folks are paid before they speak, and you get to speak with them. Is that true?
Yeah, so the basic premise of how it works is that people like Bill Clinton, Tony Robbins, Sir Richard Branson, these are speakers that are draw speakers. So there'll be typically a promoter will hire one of these speakers to draw a crowd, and then speakers like myself will offer a product or a program in our talk to monetize it. So these guys draw a crowd, but your audience tonight could be speaking alongside these speakers.
Right.
If they could develop a great speech with an opportunity for an audience to have continued education or to buy a how-to or a product or program that solves a problem at the end of their talk.
And here's the best part is it's really hard to become one of them, but it's a lot easier to speak with them and be on stage and actually be the hero for the event marketing organization because you're generating the income. So shall we press on?
Yeah, absolutely. Next slide.
All right.
So here's what I've discovered. I've discovered that there are essentially just a few things that you need to pay attention to as a speaker. So if we look right at the top of this slide, the first thing you've got to do is you've got to have more impact as a speaker. And what that means is you have to have the ability to grab people's attention. You have to have the ability to make them focus on you and your message. Now, that's probably even more important online on a video, especially if you want to grab them on YouTube. But it's very important also on a stage as well, because just because they're sitting in the seat doesn't mean that they're listening to you or giving you their full attention. So you've got to have more impact as a speaker, which really means one thing, and that is you've got to break people's pattern. You've got to interrupt their pattern so that they pay full attention to you. But that's not enough. What you also have to do, therefore, on the right-hand side there, is you've also then got to inform them. Now, we live, of course, right now in the information age. And, of course, the commodity of the information age is, of course, information. But what it really is ideas. The commodity we live in today is the ideas economy. And here's the news. The audience listening tonight, you guys listening tonight, you already have very, very good ideas. And what I mean by that is you've got answers. Because I imagine if you're like many people, you've had troubles, challenges, frustrations, and problems that you've had to solve. Well, the answers that you came up with to those problems, well, they're valuable to other people. And if you could organize those answers into coherent, structured solutions or systems that other people could follow, provided you could find that tribe who are hot for that problem to be solved, you can make a lot of money. And that's what I teach my audience to do. And what I really mean by that is you've got to not just to inform people by just giving them random information. It's got to be coherently systematized when you put it together. What you've really got to do is develop it so it becomes ultimately intellectual property, which really is what lawyers would call the value of ideas. We'll talk a bit more about that in a minute. And then it's not enough to impact and inform people. In addition to that, you also have to inspire people as well. But what does that really mean? When I say inspire people, what does that really mean? It really means you have to move people. You have to move people emotionally. You can't just speak to the logical left brain people in the audience, because even the left brain people have a right brain, even if they have a predominant tendency to left brain. They have right brain as well, which is gut, it is instinct, it is emotion. And you need to inspire people by changing how they feel, by changing their emotional state. And if you think about some of the best speakers who have stood the test of time, it is those people that have galvanized an emotional spirit, if you will. And that's what the great speakers of the world do, is they galvanize an audience. They make them believe. You talked about a Greek philosopher there, driving people, to action. It's that kind of speaker that inspires us to act, to act more boldly, to do something different in some way. So you've got to inspire, not just inform. But even that's not enough, because we can also see there that one of the other things we need to do is influence an audience as well. It's not enough just to move them emotionally so they just feel good in the moment or feel supercharged, if you will, and feel invincible. We also need to move forward to actually influence them. And what that really means is we've got to influence them to do one thing more than anything. We must influence them to change. People always talk about we've got to influence to act. That's true. But action, if in a seminar situation, in an information-giving situation, the reason they are not currently getting the results that they should be getting is because they're probably resisting some kind of change. And so just telling them what to do won't be enough. We've got to get them to a point of influence to implementing that change. Because if you're a speaker, you're in the business of change. If you're a business owner, you're in the business of change. Because if you sell a product or a service, well, that product or service ought to provide a change in the person's circumstances, results, conditions, etc. If it doesn't really provide that result, it's not a really good product, because every product or service ultimately solves a problem. And the problem is a change. If you solve their problem, that's a change in their life. So you've got to understand how to influence change. And finally, the last thing that you must definitely master, and of course, I see many speakers that are good speakers. They can deliver a fairly good speech, but they're broke. They don't make enough money. And they're going to stay in the game long enough, and that's a tragedy, because we need leaders to step up and make a difference. And so that's all about how do you make income. And as a speaker, there's only really two ways to make that income. But one is to say as a keynote speaker, and you may get paid on the low side a few $100. And on the upside, could be $5,000, $10,000 for a speech. And it sounds like quite a lot of money, but by comparison to the amount of money you can make if you do the other type of speaking, which is to speak, inspire, make a difference, add value, but then also to pitch a product or service at the end, well, I've made $500,000 in a single speech. And so that really trumps $5,000, exactly the same time frame, but I've sold a product or a service afterwards. And that's what I suppose I've made my biggest name doing, is not only for myself pitching from a stage and having, as you said, Alex, a great number of people running to the back of the room, but also having developed the ability to do that, I've also developed the ability to teach that to other people as a science and an art, so that anybody could pull it off and do exactly the same thing. So here's what I teach my students. I teach my students through something called the Professional Speakers Academy. We have several versions of this, but we have a coaching program that does this. Here's what we teach them. To have impact, I teach something called the stress-free speaker system. And we're going to talk a bit more about that in depth here this evening. And that really is all about how do you have presence on stage? How do you command the stage? How do you own the stage? How do you deliver a message with confidence and with certainty and congruency, such that the audience buy into your message and you don't distract them from it? To inform what I teach my students are two systems you can see there. One is called the unique branded solution. And what that is, it's a way that I teach my students how to take all of your knowledge that's sitting here in your head, how to extract that and put it down into really, really well put together solution frameworks. Like the one you're seeing right now on the screen, that's my solution framework called the Jet Set Speaker System. And you need to come up with your own solution framework. Think, if you will, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Think Robert Kiyosaki Cash Flow Quadrant. Think Tony Robbins' 6 Human Needs. These are the frameworks of those people. Those, what really you're looking at there, when you look at those models and frameworks, is you're looking at the intellectual property of those people. And we know the Cash Flow Quadrant had a book written about it, and through it we know that the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People also, and that becomes the branded part. You have to make it unique. What you cannot do, and should not do, in my opinion at least, is what you shouldn't do is regurgitate old, tired, worn-out, generalistic material like SMART goals, for example, or for that matter, regurgitating and reteaching NLP, because that's not unique, because somebody else is already teaching those models already. What you want to do is take a leaf out of Tony Robbins' book as an example and remodel NLP and call it something else, make it your own, add some things, subtract some things, and make it your own. That way you can brand that much better, and then you don't have to compete on price. So that's called your unique branded solution, and it's vital that you have one of those, otherwise you will not be seen as an expert and an authority until you do. Now, obviously, once you've created your model and your framework, as I've got down here, the next thing you must do is then create your various talks around that framework. And the beauty of the Kickstart Content Creator my students discover is that when you learn how to use this system, the Kickstart Content Creator, and it kind of does what it says on the tin, as in that it kickstarts you to create the content, because most people struggle to build a presentation. What it will allow you to do is create content that comes from a place of conviction inside of you, a place of belief inside of you, not a place that comes from your head. When that happens, it flows freely, as hopefully my communication is flowing more easily tonight. It allows you to be conversational in your style of delivery rather than just be, shall we say, dictating to the audience. It makes it much more easy on the ear. It allows you freedom of expression. You don't have to script everything out word for word, because that's impossible to pull off anyway. But what it will do is keep you on time, keep you on purpose, and make sure that your message hits the mark every single time. That's called the Kickstart. And that's the two systems that I teach to help people to put their message together. Because, frankly, most people who have fear of public speaking, most that's down to the fact that they haven't fully embedded their message. And they're probably trying to do it by remembering a script, and that's what's causing the fear, because, well, I'd be afraid if I have to remember words on a page, because it's damn impossible. Okay, so to inspire an audience, how do you do that? We talked about that in terms of changing your audience's state, their emotions. And there are a number of ways to do this, but a primary way to achieve it is through storytelling. Now, why do we use storytelling in public speaking? Well, because that's the way humans have learned throughout history. You know, back into the days of caveman tribes, etc., the message, or rather the wisdom, was passed on through storytelling around the campfire. For example, the elders would tell stories of them or their ancestors, of tricky situations that they managed to get themselves out of with saber-toothed tigers, etc. And by telling these stories, they passed on the wisdom to the young people of what to do and what to avoid. And that's not really changed much in history, except we're not really doing it much anymore. Not certainly in communities very much. Where we often see it now is through movies. Storytelling is often seen now in movies in Hollywood. So I devised a storytelling system for my students based on what I do, called the Tri-Summit Storytelling System, and it is based on how Hollywood movies are written. If you look in a Hollywood movie, you will see that there is essentially a pattern to how every movie is written. And most people don't know this pattern, but when you know it, it then allows you to build your story inside this framework, which makes it much easier to achieve rather than just have a blank page and kind of see what comes out. You now know what to search for within your own life to pull out these various pieces and then puzzle that story together. So by the end of it, you've got your own little blockbuster, albeit it's only going to be a 5 or 10 minute blockbuster or story, but it will leave your audience mesmerized. It also allows you to seed wonderful beliefs within the story. You can allow you to teach a wonderful part of what you're teaching in an unconscious way, because you can illustrate your points through story now rather than just sort of clicking PowerPoint and reading what's on the slide, because they can do that themselves, can't they? But what they can't do is have you elaborate and illustrate that point through a story such that they link up in their mind how this is relevant. They can see how it works in the real world. It becomes evidence, if you will, to back up and validate the points that you're actually making. Without that, you're just a little bit flatter in your delivery without that storytelling, if you will. All right. Now, to influence people, and if you remember, we talked about influencing to influence people to change, therefore implement your advice. I teach something called the Rapid Results Generator, which is really based on how human beings process information. How do we get to a point where we facilitate that change? Well, in a nutshell, if you think about it, what you have to start doing as a speaker is stop delivering information and instead start delivering transformation. How do you do that? Well, there's a number of ways, and I'll just hint on one part of the Rapid Results Generator, and that is you've got to start sharing what you believe. Your audience at the moment will have beliefs that are preventing them from having the kind of results they should be getting in one particular area of life or business. And what you can do is you can work at the level of beliefs within your content, because if you can design content that doesn't just inform, but at the same time as informing, it changes someone's belief about something, now that you've got something big and good about you. Because when you speak and you change people's beliefs just through your speech, there's something magical that takes place. That transformation that takes place is all anchored to you as the speaker. And they can't not move towards you, because you are moving them in the direction they want to be moving in their life. And maybe it's not an area they've been able to move in by themselves. Of course they're going to be buying and going to your next program, because you've helped them to move out of an issue that's been a problem for a while. So you've got to create content that both destroys beliefs that are preventing them from taking action and doing things they should be doing, and you've got to have other beliefs that you install in them during your speech, without having to use NLP, hypnosis, or voodoo, or whatever it might be. There's easier and comfortable ways to do this. I've just given you one example, which is storytelling, and there are many other ways as well. All right, let's talk about the final piece in this puzzle before we dive into some deeper and more detailed training, and that is, how do you go about making this income? Well, I devised a system for myself of all my years of trial and terror of figuring out what works and what didn't work. And by that I mean, I've certainly stood in front of an audience years ago. I remember in front of an audience for 150 people, and it was just one of those talks where I wanted to monetize it by selling, and one person bought out of 150. That's a pretty damn bad conversion. I remember sitting in the park outside and crying and thinking I couldn't do this. So I've been at the bottom. I know how bad it is. But here's the news, is that I was making all the same classic mistakes that I've seen my own students make. The same mistakes you're probably making. And out of good intention, you're probably doing all the right things, but for the wrong type of presentation. And doing all the right things in your mind, for the sales type presentation is costing you money, costing you sales. There's a way of putting that stuff together. What mistake a lot of people make is they put a keynote presentation together, they bolt a sale or an offer onto the end of it and hope that that will work. It doesn't. You've got to redesign the entire presentation with the end in mind. And I'll just say one thing about that at the moment, and that is this. The key to good selling is the ability to sell a problem before you sell the solution, and then to leave enough of a gap during your presentation that is not completely filled by your presentation itself, such they need to buy something from you to fill the gap from where they are to where they want to be in the end. And your product or service should fill that gap, such that when they come, they buy it, they get that product, they come to the service, they come to the seminar, it totally fills that gap and more, such they feel they got real value and now they've got the answers that they were missing. So that means by nature, when you're doing a presentation to sell, you have to be incomplete. That's the problem with a keynote. A keynote by itself seems complete at the end and allows people to feel it's time to clap and walk away and not buy anything else.
Now, I want to make a point, because what you've just demonstrated is not only emphatic on how the system works, because you've mentioned the metaphor and the analogy of a puzzle, but like all puzzles, the only way you can put that puzzle together is know that all the pieces are first in that box, because after all, the puzzle was a picture, was a vision, and then the blades came down and cut the puzzle into thousands of pieces, whether 1,000 or 10,000, and you have absolute certainty that unless the descendants of that puzzle maker are from the Marquis de Sade, they are absolutely making it possible for you to put that puzzle together, even though it's mixed up inside the box. All the puzzle pieces are there, but that's not what's most important. Just as Andy has demonstrated, you have to see the picture of the puzzle on the cover of the box. And what most people don't do enough is they jump straight to solving the problem versus selling the problem. Going to the solution versus creating empathy and feeling and influence and impact around the predicament or the pain points that are there. In this case, seeing the vision of the puzzle on the puzzle box, I'd rather you take 80% of your time staring at that, which is what we just did, and then when you look at each individual piece, it makes a lot more sense where you know where the corner is, you know where the middle point is, because you've looked at the final vision which was on the cover of the box. So that's what we just experienced. And I'm telling a story now as a presenter. So I hope that you see how I'm embedding my style into what Andy's saying, because I have not done this with him, so I'm hearing it for the first time like you are. But understand that he just showed you the box cover of the puzzle and all the pieces, and let's dive deeply into each of those puzzle pieces. Andy, is that a fair summation of what I just said? Yes or no?
Yeah, it's beautiful. I've never said that quite that way, but you're quite right. I kind of refer to like it's the map. This is the map of the journey. This is how you get from where you are to where you want to be. So before you, a lot of people mistake is they dive, as you say, straight into the sub parts, or they dive straight into the solution. And unless people know the map, unless you've sold them on the map and the journey, then they're not really interested in the nitty-gritty of the journey along the way, if that makes sense. You've got to sell them on the map first.
Yeah, they got to know the map before they delve into the territory. So should we go to the next slide?
Let's go to some territory. Let's do it.
All right.
Okay, so I've got 3 points here. And so I devised the stress-free speaker system because a lot of people seem to have this big problem with standing on a stage or in front of a screen and ultimately delivering a presentation that grabs people's attention and keeps it. So 3 things here. Number 1, you have to be able to control your state. That's clear. You have to be able to control how you feel. Why is that so important? Well, I mean, one, for obvious reasons, clearly, because you want to look good on stage and sound good. But there's also another reason. It's because ultimately you're going to want to influence the audience's state. you're going to want to move their emotions around as well, because otherwise they could just read your information in the book. So unless you're able to control your own emotional state, you've got no chance of, dictating, or not dictating, but influencing the audience's state. So I guess the question becomes, how do you control your state? Well, there are a few ways. We'll talk about one here tonight. And that is clearly one very important reason. What's the most valuable resource to human beings? Well, it beats love and it beats money, and that's oxygen. That's the most important resource to human beings, air. Now, here's what's interesting. I'm a little bit, I suppose, thinking to myself, does the fear of public speaking really exist? And I'll tell you why I say that. Because what happens when you see somebody speak that is not a regular public speaker, so not a professional? What we're going to see is an irregular breathing pattern. They're not going to be breathing in the normal way they breathe when they just have a casual conversation with somebody. What's going to be happening, they're going to be holding their breath, they're going to be having run-on sentences without breathing, and so by the end of the sentence they're almost gasping for breath. What they're not going to do is pause in all the right places. Now, when you read, if you're reading a block of text, what you would do is you would use the punctuation to tell you where to breathe if you were reading out loud. Of course, a comma means take half a breath. A period, or full stop as we would say in the UK, means take a full breath. And if it's the end of a paragraph, you typically take 2 or 3 breaths. But that's not what we see most rookie speakers doing. Rookie speakers don't breathe properly when they speak. They often breathe very shallow. They have lots of words coming out without pausing, and they're afraid of that silence, that pause. Well, that pause is exceptionally important for a number of reasons. Number one, from a state point of view, it allows you to take a breath. And by the way, this whole idea that we have to breathe from diaphragm, right down here in the diaphragm, fully breathing down here to sound good and to feel good, is completely wrong. You may be able to do breathing exercises like that before you go on stage, but when you're on stage, you can't take huge, deep diaphragmatic breaths. What are the audience going to do while you're doing that? You only need enough breath to reach the next punctuation, the next full stop, period, or end of paragraph. And there's something else that happens when you breathe also, and that typically happens only when you reach a period, a full stop, and that is you also swallow. Now, you don't necessarily swallow on a comma, but you do swallow on a full stop. Now, when you swallow, of course, you lubricate your mouth. If you don't swallow and lubricate your mouth's going to get dry, your throat's going to get sore, and when your mouth gets dry, that fires off a biochemical reaction in you that tells you you're afraid, because that's what happens to us when we become afraid. Our mouth does go dry because it's not a necessary organ to be lubricated at that point. We're in the fight or flight response. And if we're not getting enough air and we're not lubricating our mouth because we're not breathing properly, then we're firing off another biochemical storm that says there's not enough oxygen here, which of course is going to make you even more afraid. Now, we are anchoring machines. What does that mean? We're always looking for the cause of something. So if we are feeling stressed on stage because we're not breathing very well and we're not swallowing correctly, we're going to think that's public speaking that's causing that. It's not. It's the lack of breathing that actually causes it. So if you just focused on speaking with pause in the right place, you'd be more measured. Now, there's one more reason why you also want to pause. And that is that when you pause, when you're speaking, you give a chance for the audience to take in what you've said, make a picture of it in their mind, and then most importantly, relate it to their lives or their business or their relationship or whatever it is you're talking about. Understand this, that unless the audience relates your message, unless they reflect upon your message and relate it directly to their circumstances, no transformation is going to occur. You're not going to make any sales because they're not making a picture of themselves benefiting from the content you're giving at the moment. If they can't see themselves benefiting from the conversation you're having now, they won't be able to believe they'll benefit from the conversation you'll have later. So you've got to pause, because that's where real learning takes place. Think about it. Tonight, all of your learning is happening in between the conversation that we're having, because that's where your mind is restructuring your world. That's where, if you like, from a neuro point of view, your neurocircuits are either firing off and creating new neuro connections, or turning away from each other as we break old connections and stop old habits and build new ones, if you will. So the state is most important, and that's why you do it is through breathing primarily, although there are 3 other ways of doing it as well. All right, let's next talk about being yourself. One thing you must become comfortable doing is being yourself on stage. I see so many speakers that seem to be different on stage as they are off stage. Very different. And that worries me, because I think you disempower your audience when you're anything other than authentic and real and transparent and being yourself. Look, I think the days of the razzmatazz of an image, I think those days have gone. That was, I suppose, a big thing for speakers maybe 20 years ago, is that image. We bought into that image. I mean, Tony Robbins himself was quite big on the image 20 years ago, but today it's different, and he's changed along with other speakers too. Today it's about being closer. It's about being more, not special actually, but really similar. The best way you could unite yourself with your audience is not to be special, but to be similar. Similar, but with great answers. That way, they don't look at you and think, wow, it's okay for him or her because, they just got this special gift, or they're just a freak of nature or whatever. Instead, they look at you and say, well, if they can do it, I guess I can do it. And that way you empower people to be able to achieve the same results that you're achieving. Look, they'll put you on a pedestal anyway. What you shouldn't do is put yourself on it. So how do you do that? The best way to be yourself is to share, I suppose, 3 things. Share your thoughts, share some of your firsts, and share your fuck-ups. Sorry about that. Oops. Share your firsts, your faults, and your F-ups. Meaning,
you can say fumbles if you want.
Fumble, okay, great. Share your faults, your firsts, and your fumbles. Basically, where you have messed up in some way, so that you show how you are also just like them, but that you've overcome those things now. So that's a good, when you share a first, like I could share a first now to give an example. My first ever speech I gave, I was working for a company called Churchill Insurance. We sold car insurance, and I remember asking the sales manager after I'd been there for 6 months if I could take some of the new trainees' induction sales training. And she came back to me about 6 months later, actually. And she said, do you still want to do that training, you said? I said, yeah, okay. She went, okay, good, you're on in 5 minutes. I had no notes, no preparation or anything. I walked into this room, there was 5 people there, a flip chart and a pen, and that's it. And I can remember irritating the audience. I must have done anyway, because one of the things that you do when you're new is you fiddle with your hands. You don't know what to do with your hands. And if you've got a flip chart pen in it, one thing you're going to probably do is take the lid off and put the lid back on. You're going to take the lid off, put the lid back on, all just unconsciously while you carry on speaking. And I had done this without realizing it a number of times. And the reason I knew I must have done it is because when I went to the restroom afterwards to relieve myself, I discovered that I had a giant black spot right here in the middle of my head, where I'd obviously taken the pen lid off a few times and then touched my head with the ink on my hands. So if I can go from that to then appearing alongside people like Bill Clinton, there's every reason you can do exactly the same thing. So then what I've just done is shared a vulnerable story about myself that says, hey, I've come from a place of starting afresh too. Hey, I messed up like everyone does, but hey, I managed to get over it, and I guess I can show you how to overcome those things to avoid those pains in the first place. So you got to be yourself. Don't try to pretend to be someone you're not. Don't try to be I tried to be Tony Robbins, to be honest, in the beginning. You know, I even had, you know, if you go to a Tony Robbins seminar, you got people there clapping and stuff like this. And I thought it was a great idea for me to do as people walked into my seminar in London to find my mum and my sister and my father-in-law all dancing on stage. It didn't work. They walked straight back out again. You know, I wasn't Tony Robbins, right? So I had to discover how to be myself. It's not an easy thing to do, but it is something that's very important to do, is to be yourself. And one way you can do that is to be vulnerable by sharing some of your first, your faults, or your fumbles. There we are. And just before maybe you jump in with any questions or anything you might have in a minute, Alex, this last point before maybe we do that in a minute is to talk about your stance. Now, I would normally demonstrate this, you know, on stage, and I can't do that, but let me just say this. Men and women don't stand very well typically, and you've got to develop the right kind of stance when you stand on stage, because you've got to have presence. And it's, you know, physicality is a big part of people's perception of you. And if you don't stand the part, then they're not going to buy into your message necessarily. They're not going to believe in you. You've got to have a physicality, a physiology that makes people say, hey, you know, this is a solid person, this is a dependable person, this is someone I can believe in. And that all is down to your stance. So just to hint briefly, men tend to stand, you know, if you're doing this wrong, most men are going to stand in the macho kind of male stance, like the cowboy stance from the Wild West, which you're going to stand with your feet pointing out at 10 to 2 on the clock face. You're going to put your hands on your hips pointing to your crutch, and that's how most men stand, because that's the way that we've learned to be a man. But it's not the right thing to do in a presentation. What ladies do, they typically stand with their feet on an angle and they move their hip to one side. And that over-accentuates their femininity. Neither of those are good. You've got to stand with your feet hip-width apart, and you've got to get your hips in the neutral position. Most people slouch, and you've got to stand as tall as you can in your own skin, and you've got to stand nice and tall and straight. Everything's got to be balanced, because without that, if you don't look balanced, if your weight is on one foot even, and see this quite a lot, if your weight's on one foot, then you look unbalanced. It doesn't look like you mean what you say. And that stance also has to be maintained when you move around the stage as well. And we'll talk about movement a bit in a little while. But it's really important you get that right stance, because without it, you'll never, ever get the audience to know, like, and trust you.
Well, in the virtual online world, the stance, or you say the stance, is really the way you sit. And in this case, the way you are present. And you can give a present to your audience by being presenced, meaning eye contact. In my world, many people are looking at the screen, and often they could be looking at the fact that you could be using a little Botox versus looking at the windows of your soul. So looking at the camera on a hangout is analogous to what you said for men and women on stage, and it does make a big difference, because for my own students, when they see other hangouts where people are not looking at the camera, or a webinar where there's a visual, or television where maybe they're looking at the camera too much, there is a stance, there's a positioning, and a presence that really does make a difference. And it's nonverbal, and as we all know, and if you don't, you should, that nonverbal has more impact than verbal, which brings us most likely to the next slide, correct?
Yeah, good. So the next slide I want to talk about is, again, just to remind you, we're in the middle at the moment of this stress-free speaker system, but just to remind you, this is only one sub-part of the puzzle, as Alex referred to. And if you want to really make it as a speaker, you kind of need to have the whole puzzle piece into place. Yes, we're talking about the stress-free speaker system, but clearly there's a big difference between knowing what to do and then being able to do it. And I think most people, in my opinion, I think people fail for a few reasons, mostly because they don't have a system, but also because they tend to dabble at things. They do things on the periphery, and they don't commit to something for a long period of time. Well, you can achieve a lot of things if you put your focus on something for, say, 3 months, 6 months. You can achieve a lot, but most people don't ever commit to training or learning something for long periods of time, and that's what I suppose that's why I've been able to produce great students. To give you an example of some of the students that have produced great results, and I put my own students on stages just a few weeks ago, literally 3 or 4 weeks ago, I think it was 3 weeks ago now. One of my students that had never ever spoken to an audience before, not a public audience ever before. The only time she'd spoken is at my live training, and I was speaking in Singapore, and I randomly selected her to speak alongside me. She had some coaching before, one of my coaches, but she'd never spoken to a live audience before, and she spoke to 5,000 people, and she absolutely nailed her presentation in front of 5,000 people, her first ever audience, in front of an audience in Singapore. She was speaking alongside Nick Vujicic, who's the gentleman with no arms and no legs, who I was speaking alongside on this occasion. And I do this all the time. So I just recently before that in London, I had one of my speakers speak alongside Donald Trump and Sebastian Coe, also for their first presentation alongside me, and again in an audience of 5,000 plus people. And that's what I want to do, because good training should work immediately. But the point I want to make is that you need to have all these pieces in place in order to succeed, because yes, you've got to have impact, but you've got to put that message together. Unless that message is well formed, they're never going to buy into you. They're not going to see the implementation, the steps, and you're not going to be seen as an expert. You've got to tell great stories, you've got to create change, and you must learn how to sell and your products and services from the stage. Okay, anyway, Alex, continue.
Okay, next.
So one of the ways that I was able to get some of my students to get great results was through something called the Professional Speakers Academy coaching program. I just want to give you a few snapshots of how this works. I'm not selling this here tonight, by the way, guys. I'm not interested in that at this point in time. I'm interested in creating a relationship with you so you can see how you can benefit from perhaps me being your coach at some point. But one of the things that we do, and this is, I think, so valuable, and this is one of the things that, of course, you're brilliant at, Alex, is using the internet for these things. So what we did, we created a training where we broke down everything that people need to do, step by step, and they can just watch these videos and start implementing the advice. So this would be like the first page people see when they come onto the page. Just press the next button for me, Alex. And then what we do is we created this training where month by month, each month there's a specific video to watch to build a part of your presentation, to build a part of that puzzle we've been talking about. And that's the point, because I think it's really important that people do things in isolation, step by step, because if you try to do too many things at once, you often get poor results. I've often found, there's a book out right now that I'm reading called The One Thing. It's a really good book. It's all about breaking things down so you just focus on the one thing at a time. And that's one thing I'm really good at, is isolating the different things you need to do, that when you put them all together, you become a brilliant presenter. It's a bit like dancing, you know, each dance step should be learnt in isolation. And only the magic happens when you then put them all together. So this is the example of the month-by-month training that we run. If you press the button again, Alex, just to give people a view of how this works for them in the future, is that then this is month one, for example, and we've already talked about the unique branded solution, the unique branded system. So in month one there, we can see you've got me training people with a video, plus there's also an implementation video there, the month one exercise, where you're then given an exercise to implement that advice at the same time. So just press the button again for me, Alex. So there we can see that is the unique branded system video there, and that video goes for like 75 or so minutes. It's really deep content each and every single month. Press the button again for me. And as you can see, then you've also got then the exercise video to implement that advice, and that just happens month on month. So we just go through to month two. We'll just skip through these slides pretty quickly now, Alex. So there's month two. Again, this is called stay in pay positioning. This is what you do at the beginning of your presentation. There's 4 things you must cover at the beginning of your presentation, 4 things you need to position at the first moment you take the stage. If you don't position those 4 things, the STAY, you're going to leave your audience behind. And again, there's the exercise to implement that advice. So you build each part of your signature talk month to month. This is the storytelling one. This is how you tell great stories, how you implement the Tri Summit storytelling system, and that has 2 exercise videos there to put those together. And here's month 4. This is how you build the content, your deep content around your module that you put together, if you will. And again, another exercise there. So this is just an example. And here, this is an example of some of my students. So these are students of mine that have been through my programs, and here's testimony now to how good they are, because they've been on the big stages. They're up there presenting on my stage, other people's stage. And we've got people here that are presenting on marketing. There's people here presenting on business. People here presenting on, for example, abused women. There's a lady there. There's someone here talking about professional development, someone on copywriting. You know, whatever you want to make a presentation on, there's a way to put that message together that could position you as a go-to expert, as an authority, that could just get you those big speaking gigs. But let me say one thing. If you have that desire, that burning ambition to speak on the bigger stages, the thousands at a time, there's one thing I guarantee you're going to need to become good at that, and that's selling from the stage. Because unless you can prove that you can motivate an audience to buy a product or service at the end, the promoter's not gonna is not gonna put you on the stage, advertise that speaking slot, because they're going to take a percentage of your sales. I have no problem with that at all, them taking a percentage of my sales, because their sales I would not make if I didn't get that speaking opportunity with that particular promoter. So you must learn how to sell. That's very important. And that's the thing I'm most keen on teaching you how to do, of all the things that could be done. Okay, Alex, you can skip that. All right, so the next piece in our puzzle of the stress-free speaker system, which again, of course, is just one sub-part of the whole Jet Seeker system, is your tonality. We've spoken here about putting the message together, but now we're talking more about the delivery of that message, your tonality. Because we talked about physicality being a big part of people's perception, but your tonality is extraordinarily important. And of course, it becomes even more important the less they can see you, for example, online potentially. It becomes even more important. So you've got to really use your voice. And again, the majority of people, number one, have not been told to trust their voice. They're not pausing enough, we spoke about that, but they're also not tapping into these voice qualities that they have inside. And what I'm talking about here is a way of using your voice that not only makes you look and sound good and measured, but also the voice itself changes the state of your audience. Press the slide for me. Let me introduce you to 3 different characters, archetypes, if you will, that live inside of you. They don't live inside of you, but they kind of do, meaning they're an energy that you can tap into within you, and we can symbolize that energy, if you will, through these 3 character types. The first one I'll talk about here is the sage. The sage that lives within you has the ability to share knowledge, more importantly, to share truth and wisdom. But there's a voice quality that goes with the sage within you, and it's the voice quality that I'm using now. It's a voice quality that has a resonance to the tone. It has a medium pace, medium pause lengths, and also a medium volume length in your range. The voice is more melodic. It has almost a sing-song to it. It goes up and down, but in a fairly narrow range. So not big peaks and not big lows, but in a range there's modulation there. So my voice is using that tonality at the moment. But now you can see I've shifted into my warrior. So now you can see I'm speaking louder and faster and punchier, with more conviction in my voice. That's to call you to action, to wake you up, to make you pay more attention. But obviously if I use that voice all the time, it'll become irritating. Most people think monotone is someone who drones on all the time in a nasal kind of voice, but actually that's not true. A monotone is someone who speaks in any one of these too long. The opposite of the warrior is the lover within you. There's a lover within you that has an ability to not just share a message, but to feel it as you share it. To really own every word as if it's a word that has true meaning within it. That way, you not just speak to people's minds, but you open up their heart too. You speak to a deeper part inside of them. The lover speaks softer, quieter, with more pauses, to allow the audience to feel your message as they relate it to their lives. Now here's what's interesting. Here's what's fascinating. When you're speaking in the lover, you could be saying something that honestly has no meaning at all. But if you say it like it does, maybe it does. But what makes the lover work so well is the contrast to the warrior. Because one minute you're here speaking loud and fast and punchier with a message that's kind of conviction in the voice, and then you're there, changing and adapting your voice to suit the message. Some parts of your message are well suited to these different modules, these different archetypes within you. What you want to do is develop the ability to have them used in even just one single sentence. Changing and adapting your voice to keep the audience on the edge of their seats. That's tonality. Question is, can you tap into it? Most of us, what happens is we end up liking one of these that we're comfortable using. What you've got to do is remember that to reach more people, you've got to expand your bandwidth of communication. Again, that's one of the things we teach people on my programs, is how to expand your bandwidth of communication such that you become appealing to more people rather than just the people that are just like you. Because if you only appeal to people that are just like you, well, that's a smaller subset of the audience you're speaking to, either online or on stage. All right, let's move on from tonality. So the next piece in the puzzle, and you spoke about it already, Alex, interestingly, is eye contact. Now, of course, eye contact is incredibly important as we look down this lens here in my computer. But that's also true when you're speaking on stage. Here's the big mistake that I see most speakers making. They have something called aerosol eyes. What that means is they spray their eye contact all over the audience, never ever focusing for long enough on one single person at a time. The skill you must develop is the ability to look at one person in the audience, pick them, and speak directly to them until you finish that sentence or thought. And then move on to somebody else and speak to them for that sentence or thought. And bang, then you're off to somebody else and speak to them for that sentence or thought. And then looking up towards the back and you're speaking to them for that sentence or thought. And then you speak to somebody else for that sentence or thought. And then bang, you're straight back to somebody else for that sentence or thought. By doing that, you show that you care. You connect through eye contact. You really give the message to one individual at a time. That way, not only you will not be afraid anymore because you're not speaking to everybody all at the same time, you're picking one person out, but you're making everybody feel special and significant and important and unique because you give them a part of yourself. I remember when Tony Robbins did it to me. I was sitting in the audience, and he's telling a story, and then he looks directly at me and he goes, and it's the moments of decision that your destiny is shaped. I was looking right at me, I'm like, wow, he's talking just to me. And it made me feel so special. And that's what you do as a speaker. You give people your attention, but then you must take it away, because that's what leaders do. Leaders give attention and they take it away, because how will you ever find out if you're a leader if you're always giving the attention? Give attention, take it away, and if they follow you, in this case with their eyes, then you know you've got their attention, you know you're the leader at this time. So that's a very important thing to develop. It's not easy to develop, but it's an important thing to develop. And finally, you must be able to move your message around. Too many speakers stand too static on stage, or the opposite, wander aimlessly around the stage without purpose. What you must be able to do is command the front of the stage, the power spot. You must be able to walk to the wings, to the left and to the right. But when you get there, you must stay there. Because if you walk and then you walk back the other way, if you keep on traversing the stage all the time, you look like a caged lion. And when a caged lion walks up and down, it's because they're trying to find an escape, trying to find a way out. So you're signaling to the audience through an unconscious tell that you are afraid and you want to exit the environment. That's not going to make many sales for you. But you do want to move. And the reason you move is for the moment when you stop moving and deliver your line. Your impact lines should always be delivered when you're still, not when you're moving. But if you're only ever still, you can't create the contrast when you stop and deliver that real punchline, or as we call them in public speaking, impact lines. And these are just some of the things that you're going to need to develop here as a speaker in the stress-free speaker system. But again, just to remind you that if you want to be a great speaker, then you need to master not only the ability to be comfortable on stage, but you've really got to put together great information. You've got to have a great unique branded system, your own solution framework. You must also be able to deliver a talk. That means you don't have to script things out, but you can still have the ability to stay on task and on time and on purpose, but you have freedom of expression as well by building great models and frameworks that become your intellectual property. You've got to develop the ability to be a great storyteller so that your stories illustrate your points of wisdom and also position you as an authority and an expert in your subject, as well as seeding the audience's beliefs and changing how they feel. You've got to create change using what we call the rapid results generator to build content that only informs but also transforms. And of course, I've said a number of times, you want to make it big in this business, you've got to learn how to sell products and services. Now, if you haven't got a product or service to sell, then by the time you put together your unique branded system and solution, you'll have a product to sell, because the unique branded system is a product in of itself, the solution that you put together for people to solve a particular problem or challenge that they have for an audience that you have an affinity to in some way, shape or form. And that's what I really am keen for you to do, is to, if you can, to focus a bit more on this topic. And one of the things that I'm keen to do tonight, I don't know if you have any more questions for me at all, Alex.
I don't, because you've answered them as we've moved along.
So one of the things I'd like to invite your audience to do tonight, Alex, is to go to a particular web page where they can get some great free resources from me, some great free videos from me in a little series that I put together for them, where they can get some great training on this. And if they want to, you know, they can also join the Professional Speakers Academy coaching program and become get some really great training over the course of a number of months, of course, they want to become and remain a great speaker. So I want to earn the right. I've earned the right, I hope, tonight to have their attention for an hour. But, you know, I want to give them some great content first, allow them to make a choice whether they want to have some extended further training from me. So I thought the best way to do that would be to put together some great free training videos for them so they can see the value in this. And so that they can also see for themselves that it's possible for them to not only become the speaker they are already, but to take it to another level, to take it to another notch, so that they can get to a bigger audience than they've been before, so they can sell more products and services than they've sold before, or start at least doing that, and hopefully one day, you know, speak on those bigger stages, the way you and I speak as well, alongside some of those big luminaries of the, you know, the Richard Bransons, the Tony Robbins, the Donald Trumps of this world, if you will. And what a great positioning thing to have to do so. And if they're keen on doing that, if they have a desire to learn how to speak from the stage or the screen, this content can really, really help them, because I started from nothing, from scratch, with no knowledge. And, you know, after 10 years of doing this, I've really figured it out. And as my students will tell you, this stuff is easy to apply if you'll only spend a little bit of time understanding what you need to do to become and remain a world-class speaker. So I think maybe, Alex, you have, I don't know there, the website that we're sending them to.
Yes, it's marketingonline.com. I'm going to show it to you in just a moment. / of all words, speak. Marketingonline.com / speak, and I'll share the screen with you so you see it. But already we've had hundreds of people go there. And I think the key word here is not attention or action or free or grabs or customer or series or makes or reveals or and or that. I think the key word here is proven. Proven is so that the teacher has gone through all the embarrassing stages so the student doesn't have to. Proven is that the teacher has spent all the money and has lost all the money on what doesn't work so they could get rid of what doesn't in order to find out what does. That's the key word, proven. And in marketing and speaking, or basically anything that you do, if it's not proven, you can't trust it, because proven means predictable, proven means consistent, proven means sustainable, and the next word, formula, that is what you can count on again and again. In this past hour and 10 minutes, you have seen just a portion of that formula with all the puzzle and then a few pieces where you have to come in here and get the rest of the pieces. Andy, would you like to speak more about that?
Yeah, in terms of what they get when they come through to get the videos?
What to expect when they get the videos, and just take them through a 3-minute tour of that, would you?
Yeah, sure. So again, once they go in there's a series of videos that I put together for them, and then there'll be an opportunity for them to enroll in the Professional Speakers Academy coaching program. I showed some snapshots of that earlier in the presentation, where they'll have an opportunity for a next to nothing fee, actually, quite frankly, to enroll in that program, so that every single month they will get ongoing training from me that provides the exact training they need, that's broken down step by step for every aspect of the training that they need to do to put together a signature talk. Because let's face it, the same talk that I did, for the last 4 or 5 years, I'm still using. Tony Robbins, I've been using the same talk. Jim Rohn, same talks. Robert Kiyosaki, same talks. Once you've got that talk, that's it. That's your ticket. That's your ticket for the big game. So you can start speaking in those bigger audiences and closing bigger audiences, and maybe making tens of thousands, or certainly in my case, hundreds of thousands of dollars for a speech. Once you put that together, and then it just becomes the ability to refine it, but ultimately it doesn't change very much once it's working. If it's not broken, don't fix it. So once you've got that together, that's it. And that same thing can work on a webinar. That same presentation can work on a stage once you've got that thing together. So you're going to learn everything. You're going to learn in detail. You're going to learn how to put your unique branded solution together. You're going to learn how to put your story together. You learn how to put the content together. You learn how to pitch from the stage. You learn how to create change. You learn how to become a great speaker that can really hold audiences' attention. Everything you need to know to make the biggest shift in your ability to influence, inspire, and move an audience to action. That's going to be given to you through that online program. But first, they can watch some free videos from me anyway, so they can just make their own mind up if this is something they really want to do.
Many people think that it takes 21 days or 30 days. In the book, The One Thing, they say 66 days, right, in order to create a habit. Well, let me tell you something. If you found a shortcut after one day, you're going to take it again and again and again. So if there were shortcuts because of proven, time-honored methods, not only to have more impact, but to make more money from stage in a way that you might have been frightened before. What Andy said, people ask me all the time, don't people get bored of the same speech? Well, you're not speaking to a grandstand in a football or hockey or baseball stadium. You're speaking to a moving parade. In fact, I have a very dear friend who considers me her virtual speaker's mentor and coach, and she has a very famous story. She's a world-class speaker, has made millions, very fast-growing company, and her father was a ventriloquist. And one thing her father taught her is he would have the same speech, his signature speech. In fact, he was speaking through, the ventriloquist dummy, right? They couldn't see his, lips move, but he would go to different audiences. So the key is to find different audiences and give the same speech, because otherwise you'd be making the same mistake I made in the first 10 years of changing your speech every time, and that is exhausting, that is trouble, that is struggle, and it takes so long just to get to know the timing and what they're actually going to laugh and cry and weep at, that it does not make sense to change your speech every time. That's the single biggest lesson I've learned. So having the same speech and articulating it and refining it in such a way, Andy can take you home with that concept better than anyone else I personally know in the world. Even some of the great speakers can't teach because they're unconsciously competent with it. Andy has this unique ability of having conscious competence and unconscious competence, in which he's in flow, and then he can come down and actually sacrifice to mechanically teach you how to do it, and most people cannot do that at his level. So he's blessed in doing that, so take his blessing and learn it for yourself, and he's allowed you, and I know at the time of this recording, over 500 of you have already taken the first step. It's breadcrumb navigation. Unless you want the loaf of bread at the very end, the breadcrumbs have not been used. There's bread at the end. It's your chance to take it, and for you to take that shortcut and say yes faster. Andy, final words. It is 2:20 in the morning, and you are sustainable. You are up. I can't believe it. Your tone, your stance, everything. You're even looking straight in the camera. Your eyes aren't glazed. They're alive. I hope you can get to sleep this morning, but thank you for joining us. You are a whatever it takes person, not a best I can person. Any final words to take the next step for anyone listening right now who's not on the fence? If you're watching right now, you're not on the fence, okay? You are ready to go, okay? The question is, when? Now or a moment from now? Final words for those who are going to get started. What can they expect? What could happen when they do say yes?
Hey, listen, it's not realistic. It wasn't realistic for my students to become world-class speakers in a very short space of time and stand on big stages, but it happened. And, I think one thing, believe in yourself. Believe in your message. Everything that's happened to you in life has happened to you for a reason that shaped you to be the person that you are today. And because of that, you've got a unique empathy with audiences, certain type of audiences, and you've got a unique message that your life experiences have shaped you for. Don't be selfish and keep that knowledge to yourself. If you could share that message and get your focus off yourself and get up to who you can serve, it can be a really rewarding career for you, that all those trials, challenges, and tribulations you went to can become a true thing of the past as you stand up and share how you overcome them and how you help other people too. What a great gift to give to the world. So, yes, it's good to make money doing this, but more importantly, remember, we do this because we make a difference, because we've all got to believe in our voice more, I believe.
And I'm going to be more candid. I'm going to say you're a thief if you don't give this gift to the rest of the world, because you're robbing yourself and the rest of the world to leave yourself a legacy and to become the leader you were always meant to be. This is your time. Your time is now to at least see if you have what it takes, and you have the teacher in front of you that will teach you to that point and beyond, and invite you to his and other stages. Andy, thank you very much, and all I can say is I can't wait for our paths to cross again, mate. You did awesome.
Thank you, my friend, and thank you to everyone listening tonight. I appreciate you all, and I wish you the very best.
All good wishes.